You know, 10,000 years ago, a remarkable discovery took place. Some clever individual realized that you could take a seed, plant it in the ground, and grow a crop. All of a sudden, the previously nomadic lifestyle of hunting and gathering came to an abrupt end as we traded in our bows and arrows for shovels and hoes. Now, the agricultural revolution deconstructed perceptions of hunting and gathering as the norm and reconstructed a collective identity as humanity started living in more localized environments. And in this ironic twist of living in a localized environment and trying to tame and domesticate wheat, we actually tamed and domesticated ourselves, as we now had to care for this wheat. Now, we stayed in one location to farm, which eventually led to the development of rural villages and later cities, which are where schools started to develop. Now later, we developed a society in which education became a prerequisite for success, the same education that too many around the world are not able to access. Good evening, everyone. My name is Friedland, and it's truly a pleasure to be back in India. Thank you so much for having me. Today, I'll be discussing empowering access to education and eliminating illiteracy in the age of globalization. But before we begin, I'd like to share with you how it is that we as humanity have arrived at this incredible juncture at a time in which each and every single one of us are capable of influencing so much change. So who here has heard of the word jugaad? Raise your hand if you've heard the word. Yeah? Okay. Now, jugaad in Hindi means frugal innovation, right? And as an economist, I absolutely love this word. And who here knows what this image is? I'll give you a hint. All right, so great. We all know that it's not the Indian kite-flying holiday of Makar Sankranti, yeah? Okay. So in this image, what we see is Benjamin Franklin and his son in 1752 venturing into the eye of the storm with nothing but a kite, a spool of silk, and a key. And in using these three very little items, they bring lightning from the sky to the ground and essentially tame electricity. That's all of a sudden where humanity realizes the potential of electricity. And what's incredible about this image is that it was not until this point in time, in 1752, that we understood that these events, like lightning and thunder, were not God-driven events. Until that point, we had believed that they were completely moved by God. And what's remarkable about this is that Benjamin Franklin single-handedly demystified these myths, and in doing so, he helped create a more globalized identity for humanity. Now, following the same notion and following the same movement, 263 years later, where we continued to use electricity, who here has heard of the singer Adele? Have we heard of Adele? So Adele in 2015 released a song called Hello. And what's remarkable about this song is that in 24 hours, she reached 27.7 million people. And the reason that I bring this up is because it goes to show what an incredibly globalized, interconnected world we live in today, when each and every single one of us can have a thought or an aspiration and reach millions. Now, more recently, I was giving a talk in Jabalpur, and I met a remarkable individual named John Matthews, he's an Indian guy, and he co-founded a company called Cookbook. And they've got 10 million users around the world, and after our talks, John and I started talking. And I told him about what I was doing with my organization in terms of empowering access to literacy. And I told him about the issues that I'd had in developing an application to help this process. And after our talk, John suggested, Aaron, let's go build this app right now. Let's go build the continuation of it. 10 cups of chai later, 5 hours later, sitting in the hotel room, him and I had successfully developed the beta version of this application, which I'm proud to say is already being utilized by our partnered communities in Uganda to improve literacy. And I'll show you this app a little bit later. But it just goes to show how quickly each and every single one of us can influence so much change. Now, in realizing this opportunity, I think each and every single one of us also need to realize our obligation to ensure that we are moving humanity onwards and upwards together. And I think it's beautifully depicted by the space shuttle actually leaving Earth's atmosphere. Now, in the age of globalization, when each and every single one of us can learn from places like Khan Academy, YouTube, and get online degrees, how many students, how many primary school children do you think currently lack access to education? 10 million? 20 million? 30 million? What do you think? Anyone? So today, 60 million primary school children are not in school. And of those, 26.3 million are not in school due to distance as a barrier to education. So this means that these students want to access education, they simply cannot. And through my work overseas, I've seen the drive that so many have to go to school, with many walking over 5 kilometers to and from school. And if we as students have this drive to get to school, and still 26.3 million lack access, I think we collectively need to start doing a better job of empowering this access. Now, when children aren't afforded access to education, it has a profound impact on literacy. Let's take a more localized look right here in India. So, in India, 287 million adults are illiterate. And just to put things in perspective, that's 37% of the illiterate population of the world, of the illiterate adult population of the world. Moreover, we see a humongous disparity in terms of literacy, and this is something that we need to address. And before I explain the small work that we are doing to address this issue, I'd like to share a story with you about what got me involved in this type of work. And I'd like to take you back with me to a place in rural Mabale, Uganda. I'd like to share a story with you about a village and how it profoundly impacted my life. It's the reason I'm here with you today as the founder of the Walking School Bus, an organization that empowers access to education. The man that I'm shaking hands with is J.J. Keki. And J.J. Keki has a remarkable story. In 2001, J.J. was visiting the United States, specifically New York, when he witnessed the atrocities of the World Trade Centers. He understood the destruction that religious intolerance was capable of, and he realized that if an event like this could take place in his hometown, could take place in the US, then it most certainly could take place in his hometown of Uganda. He ended up going back to Uganda, and as a Jewish coffee farmer, he approached his Muslim and Christian coffee farming counterparts, and he explained the need for them to collaborate. And they did collaborate, and they founded Delicious Peace Coffee Cooperative. And in doing so, they achieved higher levels of economic prosperity in the region. And above that, all of the children of these coffee farmers started going to schools together, which became interfaith schools. And I'm proud to say that these are the schools that we as an organization work with in Uganda. Now, while visiting Uganda, I was struck by the incredible collaboration that I'd witnessed between JJ and the farmers, and JJ and the schools, but I realized that this collaboration could be taken one step further to improve student learning outcomes. I saw a disparity that existed between the technology that was utilized by the villagers and the lack of technology that was implemented in the classrooms. And I understood that if we could connect these classrooms in rural Uganda to classrooms in my hometown of Vancouver, Canada, and elsewhere, then we could truly improve learning outcomes in a mutually beneficial way. So, what is my motivation to be here today? Why do I care about access to education? Two experiences profoundly changed my thoughts on education. One of them was in Uganda, where I saw the distance that the students had to travel to get to school. I saw how they would arrive in class hungry as they lacked access to nutrition, a prerequisite to education. And I sat in the back of the classrooms and watched how many of the students were just as disengaged as I once had been. It could have been because they were hungry, tired, or had learning disabilities. It was myriad reasons that were influencing this. Later in India, my girlfriend and I would walk around all over. And the most memorable aspect of this entire trip were the remarkable children who would approach my girlfriend and I and speak to us in 4 to 5 different languages. They'd speak to us in English, in French, in German, in Italian. And as a student with dyslexia, I always struggled academically. And let's just say I learned to read a little bit later in life. And I looked at these children with admiration, and I understood that I never would have been one of them. Had I grown up in the same socioeconomic class in India, my parents would not have been able to justify the educational expenditure, and I likely would have been stuck in what we call the poverty trap. Now, my introduction to academic success only came a little bit later on. I was introduced to a remarkable teacher named Shoshana Burton, who taught me that the education that was espoused in class could be made more inclusive for me through something that we call experiential learning. She taught me that I could take what I had been taught in math class, for example, and apply it to a committee which raised funds for students of the Darfurian genocide. And all of a sudden, I had to learn how to make sure that I was most efficiently allocating these funds that we'd raised for these students to ensure that we could buy them as many solar cookers as possible. And these previously elusive mathematical models that I had never understood started to make sense. And they did because there was incentive for me to learn, because there was a need for me to understand them. And it's these same mathematical models and it's these same experiential learning models that we've taken and that we've applied at the Walking School Bus to ensure mutually beneficial learning outcomes. So we've got quite a few engineers here, tons of science backgrounds. Does anyone here know what this is? Does anyone know? So this is called a lichen. Has anyone heard of a lichen? All right. So a lichen represents the symbiotic relationship between an algae and a fungus. Now, usually, these are disparate organisms. They grow in different locations. But a lichen represents the rare and unique opportunity for these two organisms to come together, and in doing so, to thrive and cohabitate in an environment that they otherwise would never be able to. And as an organization, this is exactly what we do. We take previously disconnected communities, whether they're in Canada or Uganda or India, and we partner them together. And in doing so, we reckon that we make our students better off than they otherwise would be. Now, one example of this is our reading program. And how our reading program works is that students have the opportunity to read and record books that they read in class. For example, if you're a grade 11 student, that may be 1984. If you're a younger student, that may be a book like The Giving Tree. We break these books down into many chapters, and in class you read, and you read them aloud. They're recorded as an audiobook that is made by students for students. This audiobook is then sent overseas to our partnered schools with an attached PDF. And overseas, the students have the opportunity to listen and read simultaneously, which acts as a great teaching tool, improves enunciation, and provides a connection between these communities that otherwise wouldn't exist. Now, we work in a few other areas, and in the interest of time, I won't go into great detail, but what we've done is we improve access to education, to nutrition, and to curriculum. And in doing so, with these three facets, we believe we're providing a more comprehensive, holistic approach to education. Now, it's through organizations like ours and organizations around the world and this paradigm shift that we have in the way that we view education that we really have improved the way that students are accessing education. And right here in India is a great example. So in 1999, 60.5% of Indian primary female students would complete their education. And I've used female students as a baseline because we know that in India, they're less likely to go to school. Now, in 2007, we see a remarkable jump to 92.5%. And in 2009, India enacted the Right to Education Act, which made primary education compulsory, once again, drastically bolstering rates of participation. So we're seeing an amazing move forward in the way that we're able to learn, but we still do have a long way to go. And as an organization, there are two things that each and every single one of us can do to improve access to education and literacy. And I'd actually like to ask you guys to help me get involved in this. So one example is our reading program that I mentioned a little bit earlier. So this is what John actually helped me put together in the span of just a few hours. And what you may be able to see here is that you can read the book. Now you've got the recorder going. You can upload this file to our server, and we do the rest. You just pick a book that you like. It's really easy, and I would love for people, rather than just sharing things on social media and liking things on social media like we usually do, take out your cell phone and do something meaningful with it.
And now you can join our Flip Access movement, which aims to raise awareness surrounding the current realities that too many students face when accessing education.
And how our Flip Access movement works is as follows. You take a photo upside down, all right? Whether it's you doing a handstand, or whether you just take a photo like your profile pic and you flip it upside down. The next step is you upload it to Facebook or Instagram using the hashtag FlipAccess, and you tag 3 friends to do the same. And the third step is that you join our movement, and you help us flip access to education, one flip at a time. Thank you very much, everyone. It's really incredible to be back in India, and I appreciate you being here with me.